Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thanks for joining another edition of Agritecture's travel-free digital conference series. My name is David Caesar. I'm the lead agronomist at Agritecture Consulting. Joining me today is Mel Bandler from Fairtrade USA. She's the Retail Partnerships Manager. Mel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, David. I'm really excited to talk to this audience to share a little bit more about our fair trade program.
Awesome. So just to get us started, maybe, and for those in our audience, maybe we can have a quick poll of how many people have bought a fair trade certified product in the last 3 months or so. So go ahead and answer that. And in the meantime, Mel, why don't you tell me about what you do as the Retail Partnerships Manager?
Yeah, I would love to. So as many of you know, in order to have fair trade certified products available to you, the consumer, or to anyone, they need somewhere to be sold. So I work with the end of the supply chain, our retail partners, to make sure that they understand the fair trade program and understand how to source fair trade products. So I work with, any supermarket you could probably think of, as well as e-commerce sites, and we work in the food service space as well, and meal kit space. So we're really working with that right before you, the end consumer, to help them understand and be able to source fair trade products.
Excellent. What is, from the supermarket point of view, and I know you have a presentation to get into, but let me just ask you this one question. From the supermarket point of view, what is the main driver for them to be placing your products in their stores?
I think that different partners work with us for different reasons, but I'd say probably the two main reasons we see partners consistently work with us is because fair trade aligns with the sustainability and CSR goals and objectives or human rights policies that they have in place. And so we're a good way for them to work with the people in their supply chains. And secondly, we also see that it really resonates with millennials and younger consumers. And as retail outlets are looking to diversify who their clientele is, we're a really good way for them to gain loyalty and really drive, more sustainable product sales.
Okay, awesome. Well, I know you have some slides to share with us today, and if you want to go ahead and just jump into those, that would be excellent.
Yeah, I will do just that. Yeah, okay, so really excited to talk to everyone today about people-driven value chains. So here at Fairtrade USA, and I think I just have an intro slide about myself, which I won't linger too long on. Our goal is to really think about people in the supply chain and how, when thinking about agricultural production or seafood production, or even we have a factory standard, what the people in that value chain, how that impacts them. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about the people behind our food, give an overview of our organization, and then describe what that means in the produce context, and then leave some time for Q&A with David as he sees fit. So when we think about a value chain, there's people that are very much invisible to us, the end consumer. So today we're very mindful of the people that are at the supermarket, that are checking us out, that are stocking shelves, that are really, doing the logistics piece to make sure that we can be at home and sheltered in during this unprecedented times. But really every day when we think of a food value chain, there's people behind the purchases that we're making that we don't necessarily think about. So if we take a cup of coffee as an example, and that could be a cup of coffee that you would normally get in your local cafe, or the cup of coffee that you're currently brewing at home. Every step back in the supply chain, there are humans that are interacting with that product to let it get to your house or to your local store. So when we think about the people that are impacting these supply chains, it's really important to think about how, when something as crazy as a tornado or a global pandemic or some kind of impact of climate change impacts their daily lives, it's also going to trickle up that supply chain and impact our daily lives. And so for us as an organization, our goal is to really share the stories of those at the beginning of the supply chain and invest in them and to help them have resiliency in times of either market volatility, climate volatility, or world volatility, and really advocate for them, as well as allow them to advocate for themselves. As an example, this here is a photo of Flor Consuelo, who is a mother of 3 and a coffee farmer in Colombia. And she is someone who, alongside her husband, is part of a fair trade cooperative. And the investment that their family makes in the coffee industry and their participation in fair trade allows them to, think about agronomy or think about different ways that they can invest in long-term sustainability programs in their community, but that are going to have a huge impact for that crop and for us, the end consumer, to make sure that that product exists for the next year or the next 5 years, but also allows them to have a sustainable livelihood. So as an organization, Fair Trade really strives to work along the whole value chain. And what that means is working with farmers and workers like Flor Consuela, and making sure that they are growing products. So that could be anything from coffee and cocoa to seafood, whether that be wild caught or aquaculture products, to sugar, to tea, to produce, and really making sure that they abide by the fair trade standard. And so the Fair Trade Standard is a large document that is audited against by an additional third-party group. And that document requires social, environmental, and documentation and programmatic empowerment support be upheld at that production site. So it covers things like protective equipment, whether they're using pesticides or whether there's a really sunny field and no shade, they are required to have shade and potable water. So really those safety and health measures for the individuals working on the farm, but also the advocacy measures. So making sure that they can speak to management, making sure that they have grievance practices, making sure there's transparency in their pay. And then from an environmental perspective, thinking about soil health and biodiversity and making sure that waste and water management practices are in place. So for farmers and workers, the standard really offers them an opportunity to benefit, and it also is a way for them to receive credit for the work that they're doing further up the supply chain. We then work with importers and traders and distributors and people who are actually getting that product from farm to the next level. And there we are making sure that they're purchasing on fair trade terms. So one of the key pieces of the fair trade program is that for every purchase, there's an additional amount that goes into an investment fund for the farmers and workers that they democratically decide how to use. And so that is something that we are looking at the next step in the supply chain, because based on their purchases, we need to make sure that the premium is getting back to the communities. Then where I come in is to think about market partners. So whether that be the brand or the end retailer, thinking about who in the market, in a market-driven model, is able to actually drive the demand and the impact back to those farms, and to communicate to the consumer what those purchases mean and how it's impacting and driving change. And then lastly, the consumer really has the power to vote with their dollar and to think about by purchasing a fair trade good, they are sourcing responsibly and really investing in a model that's driving long-term livelihood and impact. So if we zoom out a little bit, the fair trade model, as I mentioned earlier, really focuses on 3 main areas. So it's safe working conditions, PPE, which everyone is very abuzz right now and thinking about masks, but that's really important in an agricultural context, and it's something that our standard takes very seriously. It's thinking about basic human rights protection, so no child labor, no forced labor, no kind of discrimination. Protection for the planet, as I really discussed earlier, but thinking about any kind of protections that the people are receiving, also thinking about that from the planet's perspective as well. And then the empowerment piece is really tied to that premium and the group of internal advocates that are deciding how that investment fund is being used. So from within, the community is able to raise itself out of poverty and really invest in long-term futures for both their farms and for their communities. And then thinking again about how we can communicate that piece to the consumer and engage the consumer to purchase and invest in this model. It drives the most change possible. So thinking about what fair trade means specifically in produce, given agriculture allowing us to speak today, we thought it'd be interesting to talk about what is going on in the produce supply chains, and this is produce at large. So there's obviously very individual issues that can be discussed if we're talking about tomatoes or avocados or different kinds of commodities. But when we just think about produce, what kind of supply chain risks are there? And that's what I will walk through in a second. So oftentimes when we think about why fair trade is really necessary or important in certain supply chains, we think about what is going on in those supply chains, what is the context at that origin, and what would fair trade be able to implement or over compensate or add to the working conditions that would be beneficial and drive impact and change for those farmers and workers. So oftentimes what we see on farms is that, as many of you may know, very hard working conditions for not that much pay, and it can be very backbreaking. And so at a farm, for the farm or for the business, for that one step up the supply chain, oftentimes fields can go unpicked, there's huge turnover, and there's huge migrant labor workforces. And then there's subcontracting and inconsistent, people on those farms, which can really disincentivize food quality or the picking methods, or just trying to meet whatever standards are required to get paid for the day. And so what we really see is that as a result of that, there's a lot of monocropping, there's a lot of declining soil fertility because the goal is just to produce as much as possible. And there's really kind of inconsistency across both what's going on for the planet and what's going on for the people on those farms, but generally the conditions aren't the best all around. And so we see an opportunity for fair trade to come in and offer resiliency and long-term thinking because of many different areas, but these are a few to cover. So when thinking about the health and safety of the workers, we really focus on, again, those heat stressors, the access to potable water. A health and safety committee is something that we also like to think about. So as a part of that group that's thinking about what is most important for the investment fund to be spent on, there's also conversations around how can there be better protections for the workers, and where should management be addressing issues that they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Making sure that there's rest and meal breaks. It sounds like something silly, but oftentimes on large farms, that's not something that's afforded to the workers. And then as well, sick leave, as well as healthcare access. Similarly, something we take for granted, but a lot of people do not have the benefit of accessing easily. So the second piece is really around transparency and fair recruitment and working conditions. So understanding how much you're going to get paid, when you're going to get paid, making sure that ethically recruiting of employees, and that the contracts are pretty clear for all parties involved. And then, as is relevant for the situation, but making sure that if there is housing available, that it's not forced or restricted housing, and then making sure that it's housing that's actually livable and is worth, or worth is the wrong word, but housing that is standard for people to live in and good conditioned. So the last piece that we can also really say that we see a difference in for fair trade is that for farm labor shortages, we hear all the time about how there's huge turnover and there's not a lot of possibility for continuity with the workers. And oftentimes, thanks to the benefits of the fair trade model, we really see that there's wait lists and there's people that want to continue to work at these farms because they do feel like management hears them and they do feel like they're part of a community and a family. And that really encourages them and motivates them to stay with that farm when possible. So I wanted to highlight one example of a premium project. And so, as I mentioned, for every purchase that is on fair trade terms, there's an additional amount that gets put into an investment fund. And this investment fund is something that the community gets to decide on. But more often than not, there's always a medical or health-related premium project at each of the partners that we do work with. So I wanted to highlight this example from Campos Borges, which is an asparagus farm in Sonora, Mexico. And these farmers or these workers live and work near a farm that is very remote, very far from a city, and they don't have very much access to any kind of basic health services. So not talking about specialists, but even just going to a general practitioner, they don't have that. So they decided that with the premium money from the fair trade purchases, they wanted to construct a vision, dental, and medical clinic, which you can see in the photo, which are staffed by part-time workers, and they're able to get free basic screenings for, eyes and their teeth, as well as the general checkup. And then they can have other medical services as needed at a reduced price. And the one thing that's really exciting about the fair trade model is that it's community driven, but it's also community beneficiaries. So while this is something that the farmers and farm workers put in place, it's for the community at large. So even if you're not associated with the farm, you have the opportunity to have health access. And that is something that we're really proud of as an overall community empowerment model. So closing that out, I just wanted to bring attention to the fact that we're really all in a specific situation right now that's unprecedented for everyone in terms of COVID-19. And our organization is really proud of the work that we do to support produce workers. And I randomly pulled a couple articles I saw this past week in terms of thinking about the people that are picking the food. And wanted to just say that we all are showing our appreciation and our support for the partners that I work with on a daily basis, the retail outlets. But there's also people throughout that whole value chain that we really do need to be thinking about, that are integral to our overall well-being and to the food that we're eating. But potentially aren't as visible as the person that's checking us out or stocking the shelves. And so just to re-highlight that, we as an organization are happy to be working with farmers and producers to continue as best they can in the conditions, but also to have some protections as they go out into the fields. So I'll leave you just on the thought of, continuing forward as we all don't really know what's going to happen after or when this concludes. But I think that there's definitely a balance to come on sustainability and compassion in conjunction with profit and, just moving forward and overcoming this hurdle that we're facing. But I wanted to say that I think we're all in a place where we can think about what this has meant to us and what being kind of trapped inside does, and think about how we can invest in everyone.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Mel, for sharing those slides and telling us more about Fair Trade USA. Just some follow-up questions. First of all, I see your Fair Trade logo on a lot of products, and it seems to be especially prevalent in like coffee and chocolate. But at Agritecture, we work more with vegetable producers. So maybe you can tell us some of the brands that consumers might be familiar with here in the U.S. That have fair trade farming practices.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So yeah, I think that, our roots are really in coffee and maybe chocolate, but we do have a really robust produce program. So to name a few that I think most of you have probably heard of, we do work with Driscoll's, we work with Dole, we work with a group called Wholesome, which is one of my favorites here in North America. And we work with Jacob's Farm Del Cabo, which you may not know, but if you buy Tomato Medley little grape tomatoes, you've probably seen their products. So we do work with some of the bigger, and then definitely some smaller produce players.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, customers definitely, head out and support those products that are fair trade certified. And, considering a situation like this, the COVID crisis that we're all going through, how do you feel that fair trade farms will perform? Will they be more resilient, with a crisis like this? And, why do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's something that we've all, in general at our organization or in the world really been thinking about. How are we going to come out after this? So for us, I personally really do, and this is my opinion, so my organization may feel differently, but I really do feel like fair trade workers and farmers will be better off and more resilient after or during this crisis because, as I mentioned, with our standard, we really do invest in agroeconomy and different kinds of biodiversity things and different kinds of protective equipment. And for me, those are things that investing in now and being required in the workplace is going to be beneficial for those workers. And as compared to another farm that doesn't have that, their workers are going to be more at risk. And so at least at a base level, we already know that our standard is above and beyond the normal farm condition. And hopefully that'll protect those fair trade certified farmers and workers best.
And also, yeah, the farms like the one you showed who have set up healthcare, health clinics and stuff, they have access to those facilities potentially more easily than other folks. And so that'll help, of course, keep them healthier throughout this process.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great flag. I will say, as I mentioned, majority of our partners have decided to invest money into premium projects that are health related. So I do feel like there are better health access opportunities. And I'll take the opportunity as well to share a story for one of our farms who has farms or partners, I should say, has farms in both the United States and Mexico. We actually saw that in their first year of fair trade in the US, they went from 10% insured, so health insurance, farmers and workers, to over 80%. And that's something where that's been maintained since their certification over 4 years ago. And so that's something we can also say proudly that now those workers, in the event that they did get COVID, and then I don't hope that upon them in any way, at least they have the opportunity to go to the doctor and they do have health insurance.
That's awesome. Awesome. Another question, at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned millennials as a group of consumers who I guess are more concerned about transparency of the products that they're purchasing, maybe more concerned about having specific certifications. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for our audience? What differences do you see concerning the priorities of millennials as a buyer group, or and the way they want to spend their dollars?
Absolutely, yeah. I am a millennial, so I guess maybe I can speak for my people, but I think that as more and more technology has become prevalent everywhere and people have information at their fingertips, it's a lot easier to question what's going into products. And so millennials are more than double as likely as boomers or older generations to be interested in who grew their food and how it was grown, and then to really invest in brands that are socially responsible. Over 70% would pay more or really engage with a brand that shows those practices. And so we find that that's an audience that really supports the fair trade model because that aligns with what they're already looking for in environmentally and socially responsible brands or goods.
Are you guys able to, quantify the value of having the fair trade label or fair trade certification on products? For a producer to say, hey, we know this is gonna, you're gonna have to make changes to your farm. You're gonna have to make changes to your organization, but from the producers we've worked with, they're getting this much value out of having the certification. Are you guys able to do that sort of quantification?
Yeah, so I think that makes me want to answer in two ways. I'd say for the market side of things, so we see a little bit more than a 60% awareness of our seal. And so that's when a consumer goes into a store, more than 60% are aware of what our seal is. And then about a 33% purchase intent. So that's about 33% are interested in purchasing that fair trade good. So that's a pretty good number compared to some of the other certifications that are out there. And then thinking about a grower or someone who would be getting fair trade certified, like I mentioned, specific to produce but relevant for anyone, there is that higher retention and that, willingness and waiting list to work on those farms. So it means that there isn't stuff that's going unharvested and people are, very invested in the work that they're doing.
Awesome. So let's wrap up. Why don't you tell our listeners how they can learn more about Fair Trade USA, where they can follow you on social media and all that good stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're interested in learning more, definitely able to reach out to me personally. But if not, can go to fairtradecertified.org, and there's tons of resources and a cool blog about different people who have gone to Origin and actually visited farmers and their experiences. And then if not, you can also see some purchase guides that we have. And we even created a small business shopping guide. So if you're stuck at home now and thinking about supporting smaller fair trade certified brands, that is available to you as well.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think this edition of our digital conference series has been super interesting, and yeah, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, David. I appreciate it as well.